What's up everybody? Welcome back to another video on Brett's Garage. In today's video, I'll be installing ECS Tuning's two-piece rotors as well as these EBC yellow stuff pads. In today's video, I'll also be putting on these brand new SuperSpeed RF03RRs. Today's video will not be an installation guide. It'll be more or less documenting the adventure that I went on changing my rotors and pads. There are many problems I ran into during this video while replacing my rotors and pads, such as not having the right tools or not being able to find the tools that I knew that I had. Also, my driveway has a slight incline to it, and I highly recommend you do not jack up a vehicle on any sort of incline. It was sketchy at best.
All right, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I think I'm gonna start pulling these wheels off and changing the brakes on the Golf R. Got my assistant, Leah. She'll be helping me today. Maybe not.
I just went around and broke the torque on all the front bolts and then snugged it back up. And now I'm gonna jack up the car and take the wheels off. It's just at the store and I forgot to buy more wheel chocks. So I made 4 of them. So I used my 13 mil and I loosened the bolts on the back of the caliper carrier. And I bought replacement bolts because I'm not going to reuse these. So now that I got that off, I put a zip tie up there. And I'm going to loop another zip tie on here. And then a third zip tie to hook them together. Just to hold the assembly out of the way while I pull the rotor off. I'll be replacing all the bolts, front and back. It was $116, 12 bolts. One of the issues I had to deal with was clearance underneath the vehicle. The jack that I was using was very low quality and only has a reach of 15¼ inches. If you're planning on doing this job, I highly recommend getting a much higher quality jack and one that has a higher reach than 15¼ inches. I also had a hard time. I barely had enough room to get this underneath the car to get it started. Another problem I was having is these axle stands. Again, these are super low quality and inexpensive, and I was also working on asphalt, which is not recommended because these will actually sink into the asphalt. If you're going to be doing this job, I highly recommend you don't do it on asphalt, and if you do, you get something better than these axle stands that have more surface area on the bottom. Which brings me to my next point, is using chocks. The driveway that I was working in is not very level, and I was originally using these small little chocks here. I don't recommend using a folding style chalk like that. What I ended up doing was cutting my own chocks out of 4x4s and cutting them at a 45-degree angle, and I made 4 of them. So I apologize for my neighbor's shitty choice in music. But I just got these bolts out back here. And they're 21 mil. And I was trying to use this giant breaker bar, but don't quite have enough room to get in there. So I had to use the handle to my jack, just a little bit shorter, and that gave me enough leverage on the ratchet to undo these bolts. Now that they're loose, I could just take them out. All right. Got things cleaned up a little bit. They're not totally clean, but I think they're as clean as I'm gonna make them for now. And I'm just ready to put the brand new rotors back on and then install the new pads and move to the next side. Just got the new rotor put on. Got brand new bolts in there. And I'm just gonna throw the caliper carrier back on, fasten up those bolts, and then put my brand new pads in. Pretty happy with these. They look pretty sweet. So I just barely have enough room for the torque wrench to do 1 click,
and then it hits the top of the car or the pavement. But there is 200 Newton meters of torque.
One of the issues that I ran into with the front brakes when I was compressing the calipers, I used this clamp here just to push the piston back inside the caliper. And when I did that, I took the lid off the brake reservoir just to make it easier. And what I was not expecting was the reservoir to overflow with brake fluid, and basically brake fluid went everywhere. So I was not expecting that.
Well, it's taken me 2 trips to the store, borrowed 21mm socket from a friend, and pretty much the whole day. But I got everything torqued to spec. I'm pretty happy with the install. Just got to put the tire on, and this side is done. Still have to do the driver's side, and of course the rear tires.
Another issue I had was doing the work on my driveway. The time of the year is November, and the weather was cold with lots of rain.
I probably picked the best weekend to do this. I had all my tools sitting on this red mat, and the wind just picked it right up, threw all the tools on the ground, and it blew all the way across the street over to the fence. I had to go run after it, chase it down. Almost done the front. I'm surprised this green mat hasn't taken off. Almost done. I have a really shitty jack and a really shitty jack stand. So because of that, I can't get the car jacked up very high. And I was having a lot of trouble putting my torque wrench on the brake caliper bolts. So what I ended up doing was removing this piece of plastic here to allow the torque wrench to slide up into the brake duct. And that gave me enough room to rotate the torque wrench to hit the right torque spec on here, which is 35 Newton meters.
It was at this point of the video where I stopped recording because I ran into a huge problem. The problem I had was this little bolt here that bolts the caliper carrier to the car. I ended up over torquing this bolt and snapping it. Now, how did I over torque this if I was using a torque wrench? Well, the only 2 torque wrenches that I own is this one here and this one here. Now, the problem is that this one maxes out at 250 inch-pounds, and the torque spec that I was trying to reach is 35 Newton meters, which is actually 309 inch-pounds. This torque wrench here actually does not have a high enough range to reach 35 Newton meters. On the right side of the vehicle, the first side that I did, I originally took this torque wrench and I maxed it out at 250 inch-pounds. I brought that bolt up to 250 inch-pounds, heard the click, then I switched to this torque wrench. The problem was that this torque wrench here, the lowest possible range is 33.9 Newton meters. So you're not supposed to use the last 10% of a torque wrench or the top 10% of a torque wrench because they cannot guarantee accuracy. And man, did I ever learn my lesson. When I did the other side, the left side of the vehicle, I decided just to use this one. It was already set to the same torque spec, but for whatever reason, I was not able to hear the click, and I rechecked the torque wrench. I took it off, I checked again, made sure the torque was set properly, and every time I went to go apply it, I was putting a little bit more torque on it, and eventually the bolt just snapped.
I'm going to show you how to remove a broken bolt. You're going to need a bolt extractor set. That one should work pretty good. Next thing I'm going to do is center punch. And then using the appropriate size drill bit, just make sure it's in there and it's seated. And there we go. Just like that. And that's how you remove a broken bolt.
When it came time to do the rear brakes, I had to make absolute certain the weather's going to be okay. there cannot be any rain at all. The battery has to be plugged into a charger the entire time, because if you lose power to the electromagnetic parking brake, you're going to totally screw it up and you'll have to buy a brand new one, which I'm sure is not cheap. I also needed to have my laptop with a VCDS interface that I got from Rostec. I needed that to open the electromagnetic parking brake to allow me to do work on the brakes.
All right, so I got the car hooked up to the HexNet over Wi-Fi. Car's plugged into a battery charger. Laptop's plugged in. And I just went into address 03 for the ABS brakes. And now I'm just gonna go into basic settings. And in the drop-down menu, I'm gonna look for start lining change mode. And I'm gonna hit go. And you will hear the rear brakes open all the way. And I don't hear anything. And start lining change mode. Hit go. Not running, unknown. Okay, so I just connected the interface over USB, and hopefully that'll work now. Go down to start lining change mode, hit go. Not running, unknown. Fuck. I'm gonna go back into VCDS. Connection's good. Save. Select control module. ABS brakes. Basic settings. Start lining change mode. Go. There we go. That should be it. So now I could hit done, go back, and the brakes are now ready to be serviced.
Unlike the front brakes of the car where I could use this clamp here, doing the rear brakes, I needed to get this clamp to do the rear brakes. And I had to use an even larger size adapter to get it to work on the Golf R. For brake pads, I will be installing these EBC yellow stuff pads. Now these are track pads intended for track and street use. There's a couple downsides to using track pads. One of the downsides being that they might not have that grip when the pads are cold. So the pads and rotors need to warm up a little bit before you get that full grip. So that's the end of the adventures to installing brakes on the 2018 Golf R. There were no further problems, and after putting everything back together, those EBC pads work absolutely amazing. I know a lot of people don't like the drilled rotors, however, I think they look amazing, and that's the only reason I bought them, is just because of the look. The car looks absolutely amazing, and it drives absolutely amazing, and I could not be happier. I can't believe how much stopping power these EBC yellow stuff pads have. Way more power than stock. As for the ECS two-piece rotors, well, at least they look good. So that's it for today's video. Thanks everybody for watching. Please hit that like button, and if you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. I've already done a couple mods to my car, so look forward to future videos. I've replaced this component. I've also had a local shop downtown Victoria replace some of the factory components, such as this one here. And I also had them replace this component here. So if you don't know what these are, please subscribe and look forward to seeing these in a future video.